Hello, I'm Mitch Goldberg. You're watching my live stream. It's called Be the Boss of Your Money. It's a show about personal finance to help you take control of your money. You know, the thing about personal finance is most of what we see and read, it seems, is all about couples. But there's lots of people who are single, divorced, second marriages, etc. So I think it's a very important topic to cover. And I found an expert who also happens to be a friend of mine. Her name is Donna LaScala. She is a CDFA, a certified divorce financial analyst, and a trained mediator. So she's going to join us. So in order to maximize our time with her and to pull as much knowledge out of her as possible, I'm going to run to the intro right now, and then she's going to be right here. So stick around. This is going to be a really good show. Hey there, Donna. How are you?
Good, Mitch. How are you?
Good. So nice to so nice to see you. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. And just to get to camera one here. So we know each other for a little while now. We're both board members of the FPA, the Financial Planning Association of Long Island chapter. And that's how we've gotten to know each other. And you have these initials after your name. And when we finally got around to talking about it, CDFA, I was like, wow, tell me more about it. And you certainly did. And I learned a lot from you because as a financial advisor, I don't really consider myself an expert in the field of divorce. And sometimes it happens. Clients go through a divorce. They ask me questions. And, I do the best I can in a general basis. But then I throw it back to them and say, you need to speak with your attorney. But there's a lot to know. And that's where you come in because you are a certified divorce financial analyst. So tell me a little bit about that, how you got into it, what it is, what you do, your thing. Go ahead.
Okay. So, I've been a financial advisor like you. I've been a financial advisor for 30 years. And it sort of happened, I guess, a little bit by accident that I was an independent advisor and I needed space. I needed office space, and I rented space in a law firm in Garden City, 5 young attorneys. One of them was a divorce attorney. So he and I kind of struck up a friendship, and he would come down the hall and he would say to me, I'm about to write the stipulation of settlement. I need to ask for something for my clients. Here are all the assets that are on the table. What makes more sense? Do I ask for this? Do I ask for that? So I started working with him a lot. And as the years went by, I realized how different it was when you're talking about accumulating assets versus splitting them up, and what happens to specific accounts or life insurance policies or, assets like marital homes and vacation homes and all those kinds of things when you start talking about splitting those between 2 people. And it occurred to me that there was more that I needed to know. And I got involved with a group called the Women's Financial Group, and I met a woman who is a mediator. So my friend Ada, hi, Ada, if you're out there listening. So Ada was the first mediator I met, and I had no idea what that really meant. But I learned from her that there are other ways of getting divorced than the traditional litigated model. So in the litigated model, you have 2 attorneys. They go into court, and as one of my friends says, who is an attorney, as she says, when I'm litigating, I go into court and I stand in front of people with my sword and my shield, and I'm their voice. Well, that doesn't really work very well. And the legal system as we know it is jam-packed with people trying to get divorced. In Nassau County, I think there's 6 matrimonial judges that take care of all of these people getting divorced. They just don't have the time.
Yeah, and just so people know, that, if people don't know, there's almost 2 million people who live in that teeny tiny little Nassau County on Long Island. So when you look at it at a map, you realize how many people there are there.
Right. So, there's a lot of people getting divorced, and especially now after what we've been through with COVID, the court system is so backed up that even on a good day, it becomes like a hamster wheel. You get into that system and you just rinse, wash, rinse, repeat, and you keep going back and nothing gets done. And the statistic, as I had shared with you the other day, is that of all litigated divorces on Long Island, upwards of 90% of them are actually settled out of court by the parties involved, with their attorneys, of course. So when I started to learn all of this and understood what mediation was and became trained as a mediator, and then I learned about the collaborative model, which is a hybrid really between mediation and litigation. And I also realized that there was a lot that, just as a financial advisor, I didn't know that I needed to know. And that's when I went for the Certified Divorce Financial Analyst designation. In addition to which, because as a financial advisor, if I have a client that is getting divorced, I really can't represent them in the divorce if they're going through the collaborative process, because I have a vested interest in the outcome because they're my client. So
right, you want to keep it conflict free.
exactly. And it's called a financial neutral. So there are many different ways that I can work as a CDFA. I can work for my client if they're going through litigation. I can work for my client if they're going through mediation. I can be hired by the attorney. I can be hired by the mediator. If I'm working in the collaborative process, I'm part of a team. And that team includes 2 attorneys, 1 for each party. It includes the financial neutral, which would be me or a forensic accountant or other CPA. And it includes a family specialist. The reason being that everyone involved in the process is singing from the same song sheets from day one. And they're working for the client to get to the optimal arrangement. Because as we all know, once you have children with someone, they're never really out of your life. And it's really in everyone's best interest to have it remain as amicable as possible. So putting together a really good team is absolutely someone's best offense in this situation. So
can I just say this? When you and I first started talking about this, you kind of painted the picture. And by the way, for everyone watching, if you're watching this in the live, welcome. If you have any questions, any words of wisdom, you just want to say hi to Donna, do it in the comments. Just ask us any questions you have in the comments. We would both love to hear from you. And if you're watching this in the replay, welcome to you as well. And we will both see your questions. And I know Donna will definitely want to answer your questions if you ask them in the replay. So go ahead and ask. We love hearing from you. Now, the picture you painted to me, Donna, was like, okay, so 2 people decide, okay, we're going to get divorced. They get their attorneys, they go to court, and they think that their case is going to be presented. They're going to maybe get in front of the judge, and it's going to be fire and brimstone, and then the light is going to come out, and they're going to have their case heard, and it's very important. But it's really not like that. You kind of go, you go at your appointment time, you sit outside the courtroom, you sit some more, and you sit some more. The attorneys
absolutely.
go in, right? The attorneys go in, they come out, and they say, the judge said settle, and then nobody settled. Nobody talked about settling. Everybody's very angry. It's such an emotional, horrible thing. And then you come back in 90 days for the same exact thing. In the meantime, the wheels on the slot machine are going and going and going because that's your legal fees adding up. Is that more or less it?
That is absolutely accurate. And one of the things that I like to say to people,
I'm a good listener.
This is not LA law. This is not, Law and Order. It's not a TV show. This is real life. And what happens
It's not Boston legal.
It's not Boston legal.
I age myself.
Well, yeah, but you
It's
have to
Perry
realize
Mason.
that you get into the system and there's only so much that can be done. And the judge really does not want to hear your case unless it's absolutely necessary. And really only 5 to 10% of cases really need to go to a jury trial or go in front of the judge, because really what you're doing is settling everything yourself. You have to sit with your attorney and decide how much is being paid in child support, how much is being paid in maintenance, if anything. What is being done with the 401k? What is being done with the marital residence? What happens to the children as far as custody is concerned? Most of those decisions get made by you and your soon-to-be ex and the attorneys. What happens in the litigated scenario, though, is everyone thinks, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to tell my story, and the judge is going to feel so bad for me that I'm going to get everything. And then the other side thinks the same way. Well, I'm going to get everything. And like I tell people, two people cannot get everything. There have to be compromises. Somebody's going to have to give up something or some portion of something. And there are some very specific ways that that's done. And everything is done a little bit differently because, as I said to you the other day, all assets are not created equal. So, you and I both know, dealing with clients' assets, that there is a distinct difference between non-qualified assets and qualified assets. And this is a jargon that we use every day, and we understand what those things mean. And then within those asset classes, there are so many nuances and differences as far as assets are concerned, as far as taxation is concerned, as far as ownership is concerned. So you really have to know the specifics of what you're dealing with. And a lot of times, attorneys know the law, but they don't necessarily know the assets. And that becomes very clear when you're going through the process.
That is surprising to me because, you take an experienced attorney and you would think they would know all of these things. I guess there's basics, there are a few basics, but at what point do you see assets where it gets to be complicated? A house complicates things. A mortgage complicates things. Then you throw in the issues with the children. That complicates things. Maintenance. It just snowballs. How long does the average divorce take to settle? Is there a number for that?
Well, it depends how you're doing it. If you're going through the litigated process, it could take years. I mean, I went through my own divorce. It's going to be 8 years ago. And I remember this one day in the courtroom, outside in the hallway, because I never actually went into the courtroom, never saw the judge, still would not know what he looks like if I tripped over him on the sidewalk. But here we were sitting in the hallway, and I'm sitting next to this woman who just starts silently crying. And I looked at her and I said, stupidly, because I knew the answer to the question, "Are you okay?" And she said to me, "No, I can't. I can't do this anymore. It's been 5 years." And the man across the hall from us kind of chuckled under his breath. And he said, "You think 5 years is bad? I'm going on 10. That's not normal. There were obviously issues in those cases. But even when you have adult children and assets that are really pretty clear cut and not complicated to separate, it could take 2 years. Because when you get into the process and you don't settle every 3 months. So, think about that. If you go back 3 times,
2 years.
that's 9 months. So, it could take a very long time. And then what people don't understand is that once you've settled and once you sign that separation agreement, you still have time to go because the divorce is not automatic. It then has to be filed with the court, and you actually have to wait for a divorce decree to be issued in order for some things to actually go into effect, such as if you've got retirement accounts that are in 401ks or 403bs or a pension, if you're a civil servant like a teacher or a police officer, and you're going to be splitting those assets, it needs what's called a quadro, QDRO, which stands for Qualified Domestic Relations Order. Sometimes it's also just known as a DRO, Domestic Relations Order, but it's an instrument that is issued and signed by the court and needs to be sent.
It's not a DMWM.
No.
Don't mess with me decree.
No, definitely not. But you need this legal document to send to the third party administrator of either the 401k, the 403b, or the pension in order for those assets to be divided. They will not do it without it. What's becoming even more complicated is the general rule of thumb is that when you have an IRA, you don't need a quadro or a DRO in order to separate those assets. You need a letter or you need a form that gets sent to the institution. But what we're seeing is that with a lot of more complex assets like annuities, if you have an annuity in an IRA, which is not uncommon because they have guaranteed streams of income, the annuity company is requiring a quadro because that asset is much more complicated than just, I have a mutual fund in an IRA. It has a death benefit. As I said, it has a guaranteed income stream like a pension. So there are a lot of things that are making the process even more complicated. So I had to wait another 6 months for my divorce decree to actually be issued and the quadro to be signed off. So then it was another 6 months from there after my divorce was actually final before I saw the money. And that's not unusual. So people go in, as I had said to you, people go in with these myths and these ideas about what's going to happen. And everyone has an opinion. You know, my brother's wife's brother is a plumber and he said, well, what does that have to do with anything? But everyone's got these ideas about what's going to happen. And it doesn't necessarily go the way you think. And that's one of the reasons why you need a team of professionals who can say to you, okay, this is what you need to do. This is what's going to happen. I can tell you from experience of my own or clients that these are the things that are going to happen. Because the most difficult thing in this is managing people's perceptions of what's going to happen. So like I said, it's not LA.
Compounded by a lot of emotion.
Oh, absolutely. And that's really where I think with the collaborative process, you have a family specialist on board from the beginning. And that person can really help the couple, the kids, and the professionals deal with their emotions about the situation. Because believe me, you know, I've been doing this for 20 years now. My first client is divorced 20 years, and she and I are great friends, and we go out to lunch all the time. But the thing is that sometimes as a professional, you have an emotional reaction to a situation where look, this is just not right. This is, if it were me, or whatever. You're a human being, so you have your own emotions about the thing, but you have to try to stay as professional and neutral as possible. And I talk a lot to the women, and it's mostly women that I deal with that are going through the divorce. And I say to them, look, as a professional, I can tell you all of these things. But as a human being and as a woman to woman, let me tell you that, yeah, I know this is hard and I know this hurts. And I know you can't even see, not only can't you see the light at the end of the tunnel, but sometimes you can't even see the tunnel. And I know that what you're going through is so difficult and so emotional. So let me help you talk about all of that. There's this one woman that came into me, sat down in my conference room, and she brought me this accordion file full of papers. And I could see like the aura of anxiety around her was so huge. And I took those papers and I pushed them aside and I leaned into her and I said, just talk to me. Tell me what's going on. Tell me what's keeping you up at night. What are you afraid of? What's your biggest fear? And by the end of that first meeting, she actually got up and she hugged me and she said, thank you so much. I am so glad I met you because now I can see the picture. And I create scenarios for my clients and I kind of say, okay, so if this, then that. If this is what you want, tell me what you want. And if it's possible, let's figure out how you're going to get there. And I create scenarios for them so they can actually see the picture of what that's going to look like.
Oh, just got a nice, happy comment over here from Elisa. Hi to two of my favorite people. Hi, Elisa. Hi back to one of our favorite people. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Folks, if you have questions, hit us up in the comments. If you have words of wisdom, something you want to share, something you want to ask, that's what the comments are for. We love hearing from you. Most of personal finance that we do with, the planning and the software, it's so often geared toward couples. And it's just not real life. We all have clients who are divorced, who are married, remarried, etc. So I find this, I think this is super helpful. I think this is going to be super helpful to any of the financial advisors who are watching out there. But when you represent a client, are you representing both the husband and the wife, or are you just representing one half?
It
Or could it be
depends.
both?
It can be both. So sometimes I represent one part of the couple because they're the ones that need the most assistance. Sometimes when I'm acting as a neutral, I will represent the couple. I just went through this with, and we talk about, how COVID has affected all of our lives and our businesses on a daily basis. And I was very surprised that I actually did get an email from a woman who had found me online and said, my husband and I are contemplating divorce, and we want to meet with you first because we know that a lot of the decisions that we have to make are financial. And so she called me, I spoke to her, then I met the two of them on Zoom, and then I actually did do a socially distanced thing with them in person, all masks, and it was kind of odd, but we did all the work that needed to be done. And then I went back to my office and I did some more work. And then I presented them with their financial picture. They then went to one of my colleagues who is a mediator, collaborative attorney, litigating attorney. They worked with her. And she said to me, oh my God, it was so easy to do this with them because you'd done so much of the work already for the finances. And the point is that I was able to kind of say to them, okay, here's everything that's on the table, and here's the way it can work. One from column A, two from column B. Let's plug this into the scenario. Is this what you're looking for? Let's tweak it a little bit. Let's come back. Let's try it again.
That sounds
But
like they were looking for a smart, collaborative, compromise solution.
Exactly. But
Yeah,
they also had financial advisors. That was not my role. My role was to focus them on the equitable distribution of their assets. And as a neutral, I was also able to have a conversation with them that there was going to be at some point in the future an inheritance. And the husband looked at me and he said, oh, absolutely, it is on the table. Normally, as a financial advisor, if one of my clients came to me and said, I know that I'm going to be getting this money from my parents when they pass away. I don't want this to go to my spouse. It's my money. And I would do everything as a financial advisor to tell them, yeah, absolutely, you should keep that. That's your money. But in this process, as a neutral, I could actually say to them, okay, if that's what you want to do, then that's how we will make this work. And that's what we will factor in. And then the mediator said, not a problem. If that's what you want, that is what we will do. So I represented both of them, but there are more often times when I'm only representing one person versus both. But at no time, if I am acting as a neutral, can I then be the financial advisor for either one of those people. That's where the firewall is. So I send them back to their existing financial advisor with the understanding that if they have any questions, they absolutely can come to me as far as why was this done? How was this done? What was the theory behind this? And I can certainly, tell them how it worked. But I'm not taking anybody's client away. I'm acting in a very specific role through the divorce process.
and I think that's like really important, and that's something that you and I spoke about the other day. And I had already I had already asked you to be on the show because it's we're not like that. You know what I mean? Some people are just
Exactly
so overly territorial, But my thing was that when you said that, I'm like, it's so great that you mentioned that. And I was like, wow, really? You don't put yourself in the position of the financial advisor saying, I don't want to lose my client because you're so wonderful. But I think, if the financial advisor is worried about that, then they have bigger problems than that. That's how I see it.
and I mean, the logic of the situation is that there are times. So if I'm dealing with a litigated divorce or I'm dealing with a mediated divorce and I'm being hired by one person, Then I can say to them, okay, if after the divorce you need someone, I can do that for you. If you don't already have an advisor, I can be the advisor for you, because I haven't been acting as the neutral. I've been acting as an advocate. So in a litigated divorce or in a mediated divorce, sometimes I am hired as the financial advocate for one part of the couple because they need advice. I see so many people, so many women especially, even to this day, that are not the ones in the relationship that have been handling the finances. You know, I very tongue-in-cheek say I grew up in the world of Donna Reed. I'm from that generation because my parents were of that generation, that the man worked outside of the home and the woman stayed home and was the homemaker and raised the children. It's the way I was raised. If I didn't do what I do for a living, I might not be as savvy about money as I am. And I still
Sure.
find a lot of women are not, because they've been brought up with those more traditional roles. That's one of the reasons why I think it is so important. And with the Financial Planning Association, as you mentioned, I'm the chairperson of the Women in Finance Committee because we are trying to mentor young women into the business and do networking and education for women, because it is so important for women to know, and as your show says, be the boss of your money. It doesn't
Right.
mean that you have to take control, but you have to be knowledgeable and you have to be involved. And so many women still are not. And they come to me. I just had a client who's in her early 40s come to me and say, I know nothing about my finances and we're getting divorced. And she was terrified.
Yeah, she's terrified that she's going to get the short end of the stick because she doesn't
Exactly.
know, you don't know what you don't know. So you need the advocate. What is when somebody comes to you, let's say you're now advocating for one half of the marriage,
Hmm.
husband or wife, the person you're advocating for, if you see them saying, "Oh, I want this, I want that, I really want to rake the other person over the coals, I want everything." Do you say to them, "I can't help you," or do you say to them, "That's not how it's going to work unless you expect the other person to completely roll over"?
Well,
Or, at what point do you say, "Listen, you're call me when you're ready to work out a deal"?
that's a very interesting question, because one situation which I will never forget, I was actually called in and hired by the mediator to assist her with the financial negotiation, because the
Mhm.
couple was so antagonistic. Even though they were in mediation, they were so antagonistic. And the husband was a civil servant, so he had a finite amount of money and resources. I mean, it was very clear. There was very black and white. He wasn't in a cash business. He wasn't hiding assets. It was very black and white. And the wife was just determined. This is what I want. This is what I'm entitled to. This is what I'm going to get. And I, brought in a big white chart and drew lines and graphs and this side and that side and moving things around. And she was just adamant, no, this is what I want and this is what I'm going to get and this is what I deserve. And I looked at her at one point and I said, but you can't get blood from a stone, because this is the amount of money that he brings in on a monthly basis. And if you take this much of it, he will have nothing left. And she looked at me and she said, I don't care if he lives in a hovel. And I was just like, well, I don't know how I can help you then. Because if that's the way you feel about this, I'm really not so sure that we can move forward. And at that point, she got up and stormed out of the room. And I looked at the mediator and I said, I don't know what else I could possibly say to her. And the mediator looked at me and said,
Why are we here? Why are we in
that's why I
mediation?
called you in,
Back to
because I
litigation,
need
back to the
help.
courthouse.
So, there are certain times when you have to just kind of bring them back to reality and say, it's not possible. I understand. I hear you. And those are some of the tools that we learn in mediation. And I am trained as a mediator. I hear you. I understand. And I know what you're telling me. Is there a way that we can move forward? And can I help you see that there are other ways of looking at this? Because the worst thing you can do to a person is say, no, you're being ridiculous and that's just not going to happen. You have to really try to
Yeah,
pull them.
once you get into that kind of relationship, the other person's guard goes up, and that's it. You can't get through to them anymore.
Exactly. And there's science about it too. There is absolute science that when the brain is reacting emotionally, it shuts off and you cannot think logically. I call it like the deer in the headlights look. I see that these people, they just start to like glaze over. And you're looking at them and they're looking at you, but you know that they're not really seeing you. They're not hearing you. They're not seeing you. They have switched their brain off because it's so emotionally charged. It's an amygdala response, actually, is what it's called. The amygdala just shuts down. It's that fight or flight response. And you can't think logically when you're in that frame of mind. So a team of professionals is really what's needed in those situations to try to tell people, okay, I get it. I hear you. I understand. But let's try to figure out how we can make this work. It's challenging.
That is
very challenging.
I can't imagine. I want to thank you for your time. Remember when we spoke about this? I said 30 minutes goes by.
Goes fast.
Really fast. So we're on for 31 minutes already, believe it or not. And it flew by. It's very interesting. And I think it's fascinating what you told me. We'll have to do this again some other time. We're speaking with Donna LaScala, CDFA. She's an expert, very caring, kind person. And we do have a question. Let's see. Donna, have you ever advised people not to divorce because it would be best financially?
Well, it's interesting that there are times, especially when a couple is in mediation, that they decide, you know what, we're not ready to do this. And I've never specifically said to them, you cannot afford to get divorced, because I don't believe that that's true. I believe that there is always a way to make it work, because the worst decision you can make is to not do something because of a financial reason when it's really an emotional reason. So I would not say that to somebody unless they said to me, I cannot afford to do this. I would probably then go through an exercise with them and say, okay, let's examine that. Is it really possible? Is it not really possible? What compromises need to be made in order to get you to where you want to be? But I don't think that really is the right answer. You can't afford it. There's that old saying, it's cheaper to keep her. Not necessarily, because think about the emotional
I never knew what that
toll.
meant, but now I do.
Think about the emotional toll it's taking, and everything that happens after you make that decision. Well, I can't get divorced because I just can't afford to. It's a huge, huge issue to really make that decision. So I'm not going to tell somebody, no, you can't get divorced because you can't afford it. I'm going to say to them, let's figure out a way.
Every person I've ever met who has been through divorce has always said, I wish we did this sooner.
Mm. Yeah,
right?
A lot of people do say that. If only I had known, I would have done this sooner.
And it's hard to go through. But something tells me you are the right mediator and or advocate to get through this. We have a question from our mutual friend, Robert. How about if someone is married 9 years and may want to wait for 10 and a half for Social Security?
Yeah, so the 10 number is a very crucial number. Thank you for bringing that up, Rob. So you have to be married at least 10 years in order to qualify for your spousal portion of Social Security. And that really is very important for a lot of women, because if you have taken time off from work to raise children, that's a disruption in your earning capacity. If you've taken time off to care for an adult parent, that's a disruption in your work history, and it will affect your own Social Security. or if you've chosen not to work outside the home while you're raising your children. All of that will affect your own Social Security benefit. So even if you're divorced, you can qualify still for a spousal benefit on your ex-spouse's Social Security. And one thing that most people don't understand is it does not diminish or take away from your spouse's portion. So let's just say your spouse is going to earn $2,000 in Social Security benefits monthly.
But there's no reason for them to fight it. It's, you know, it's no skin off their back.
So as a spouse, you are entitled to up to 50% of that benefit. But you have to be married at least 10 years.
And a half years.
You have to be at least 62 years old. So there are a lot of parameters that are set for Social Security, but there have been times when I've said to somebody, are you married at least 10 years? And they say to me, no. And then I tell them, in order to qualify for Social Security, I know you're only X number of years old now, but in order to qualify for spousal Social Security, you have to be married at least 10 years. So it does kind of make them think about that, but then go back to how long does it actually take to get divorced? So you could, because it's the actual divorce filing date of the decree.
Robert says 10 years to receive 50%.
To receive 50%. Yep, it has to.
10. It's 10 years.
But now think about that, because you can be in a second marriage and be married 10 years and then be divorced from that person. You could be married to several people for 10 years, and then you get to choose which spouse you qualify with. It's not the last one.
On all of them.
No. But think about Social Security. So you could have a man who's been married 3 times, each and 10 years to each spouse. There are 3 women that could be claiming on his Social Security for their spousal portion. That's why Social Security is bankrupt. That and a few other reasons, but that's one of the bigger ones. So it's a very interesting subset of this conversation that most people don't know. You can still qualify for spousal benefits even if you're divorced.
Thank you so much for the conversation and
my pleasure.
Filling us in. And we're definitely going to end it. I'm going to bid you a farewell. Thank you very much. And we'll talk very soon. Okay.
Absolutely. And I'd love to come back and finish the conversation.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Mitch. Take care.
All right. So that's Donna LaScala. She knows what she's talking about. And I learned a lot here because I do have clients who go through this process, this horrible process every now and then. And it's nice to know that I have a little bit more knowledge to help them with. It's also nice to know that I know just enough to hurt them, so I will bring them the proper professional. And sometimes it's not just the attorney. Just want to say thank you so much for joining us, and I will be back tomorrow. This is Be the Boss of Your Money.